Hi y'all, it's Kathy. How you doing? I'm so happy to see you this morning. I have news. So I've brought the kittens. There's one. I have 3 black cats. That's one of the kittens that I was able to save. Isn't he cute? That's Onyx. He's into everything. Anyway, that's one of the kittens that I was able to save that was so cute. I brought them all into the shed with me. I had never intended to share my shed with anyone. I didn't have the kittens or the cats when I got this shed. I got this cottage. I got this cottage to have a place to come and do my painting classes and everything, and to get my supplies ready and all of that, and just have a place to paint and to do videos. And then I wound up taking in all those feral cats this past spring, and they were all sick, as y'all know, and I have nursed them back to health. I lost 5 cats. I had to bury 5 cats in my yard because little kittens, because, you know, they all got that flu and they had the mange and everything else when they came up here, and I wasn't able to save all of them. They were just too young. But I saved, I wish I could find the baby. Let me see. Here she comes. Maybe she'll come over. Come here, baby. Snow. Come see Grandma. Come on. No. She won't come. Maybe she'll come in a few minutes. She's thinking about coming. But, oh, I know. I'll take the camera down and show y'all. We'll get to our ghost story in a minute. Hold on. Let me see. Snow. Look, Snow. Snow, looky here. Let me see if I can find her on the camera. She's sitting right there. Let me take the camera off. Sorry, y'all. I'm being so unorganized. See what happens when I get babies around me? Hold on. Let me get Snow for you. This is the cute. I named her Snow Leopard. Look at her. Isn't she the cutest little thing? Say hi. Don't be shy of the camera. Yes, Mama loves that baby. Looky there, and she precious. Oh, she's so precious. She looks like a little leopard, so I named her Snow Leopard. And I have Onyx, and I named, they're all around here, y'all. I have 3 big cages in here. I don't know, I've got to get them a little more organized. I'm going to get another big rolling cage so they'll won't be all over the place, but I'm just going to let them roam freely. And I'm allergic to cats, and so is my husband. But you know, you just have to go with the flow, right? Anyway, they are costing me an arm and a leg for all the cat litter and cat food. Anyway, so I will sell my false eyelashes. Everybody's been asking me about my eyelashes, and so I put a link on here. If you want to get my false eyelashes, I will place an order once or twice a month for everybody that signs up, and I'll ship them right to you, and it's going to be $20 for the eyelashes. You get 14 pairs of eyelashes like this, and plus the shipping, I'll ship it to you for $20. So if you want those, just go to my link that I put on here. I don't know where it's going to show up, either in the description or at the bottom, because everybody's been asking me about my eyelashes, and I will tell you that I've tried many eyelashes, and these are the ones I like the best. So, sorry, that's my big sales pitch for the day, and my sharing of my little life with my little kitties. So today I'm going to do the story of, I have 2 stories and I may do both of them, because I'm going to be out of town next week. So I may do both of them real quick. It won't be real quick, or I may do one and go off and do the other one. It depends on how long it takes me to do the one. So the first story I'm going to tell y'all about is called Camouflage Angel. And the reason that I I wrote a book called Camouflage Angel. And the reason that I wrote that book is because I had, as y'all know, the beauty shop, that same beauty shop that was haunted and everything that I told the other stories about. Anyway, one day I was at the beauty shop, and everybody was gone. It was a Monday. I'm the only one that would come up there on Monday usually. And so I just do the customers that I wasn't able to do during my regular work week, or if someone had something special they needed to do, I would do them. Anyway, I wound up coming up there to do a customer's hair, and she was running a little late, so I ran next door to the convenience store to grab a Coke. And when I came out, there was this man getting out of a big white truck. Hi, Sister Diane. I see you're watching. What did you say? You there now? I'm here now, Diane. Hi, I see you. That's my big sister, y'all. Anyway, Diane, don't get me off track. You know how easily it is to distract me, but I'm so happy you're here. And don't be worried about me. I know you're praying for me because I have all this spiritual stuff. Anyway, I went in the convenience store, and when I came out, there was this man pulled up to my shop, and he was getting out of his truck, and he was a great big guy, probably 6'4" or 6'5", weighed over 200 pounds, but really stout, you know. And he had a military haircut, a flat top. And, you know, to tell you the truth, at that time, at that salon, we did mostly ladies' haircuts. We did do men's haircuts, but mostly we had ladies with color and everything. And I knew that none of my other girls could cut that flat top, or I didn't think they could. I knew that I could because I used to work by an Army base and I had to do flat tops a lot. However, I didn't have time. So I said, were you planning to go in there to get a haircut? And he said, well, I was. And I said, well, I'm the only one working today, and I'm already booked for the day. We're actually closed today. I just came up to do a customer. And I said, and the flat top that you have looks really good, so I think you should go back to whoever's doing that flat top for you and just tell them how good a job they're doing and let them keep doing your hair. And he said, I told my wife you would say that. And I said, well, who's your wife? And he said, he told me her name, and I'm going to use a fake name because, you know, I don't tell anybody's real names on here. Anyway, he said Mary. And I said, well, I know Mary. Actually, that's her real name. I just messed up. Mary. I said, well, I know Mary. She's so much fun. She's one of my favorite customers. And he said, well, I told her you didn't do men's hair. And I said, no, we do men's hair. And he said, which y'all don't do flat tops. I said, no, I do flat tops. But I said, truthfully, the person doing your hair is doing a really good job, and you should just stick with them. And I said, because it's hard to get in with me. And he said, all right, well, thank you, you know, and he left. Well, that's the only time I ever met the man. I heard about him later on from his wife. And when I said, you know, your husband came by, she told me a little bit about him, just that where they lived, you know, and that he was a hunter and things like that. Nothing big deal. I really didn't know much about him. Anyway, later on, about, I don't know, within the next 6 months or so, she came in and told me that he was sick. And they didn't know exactly what was wrong with him, but he was really sick, like in a liver problem or something like this. Maybe because of hepatitis C, contracting that somewhere or something like that. And we all started praying for him because he was not doing well at all. Anyway, he wound up passing away. And I had never seen him. Oh, you know what? I did too see him because he started coming to the salon and having my daughter do his pedicure. She'd give him a pedicure, and he would bring his girls, which I knew them too. They were clients of mine as well. I did their hair, and he would bring his girls, and they would go back there and get a pedicure with my daughter. Sometimes he even let her paint his toenails with that military camouflage design. And so that's where the word camouflage started coming into my mind concerning him, I suppose. And he was just a woodsman and all the things. Anyway, they wound up, he wound up passing away, and it was really sad because for my friend and for her daughters. And so after he passed away, I didn't even know he had passed away yet. I was in the salon on another Monday doing one of my hairstylist's hair, and I had her head down, and I was trying to get a foil in there, and all of a sudden a big black mist rose from the ground right beside me. You know, when you're a hairdresser, you have that mat under your chair. Well, like from that mat, a big black mist just rose from the ground, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. And at first it kind of startled me, it scared me, but then I was like, what is going on? And it got bigger than me, and it was just there. And about that same, and I was like, talking to my hairdresser. I was like, Kelly, do you see? And she's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to see anything. She wouldn't raise her head up. And right at that minute, a lady came walking in the shop, and she was one of my friend Mary's best friends. And when she came in, she didn't say anything. I said, Billy passed away, didn't she? She said, yes. I said, well, he just came in here right before you. I saw this black mist come up, and it's like it just went to the back of my shop. And I said, he came in here with you. And she said, well, that makes sense to me. And I said, why? And she said, and another friend had seen this at the hospital. She said, well, because I'm fixing to leave to go with them to make funeral arrangements for him. He passed away last night. And another friend was sitting out next to his door when he passed away, and she saw a black mist come out from the room and go past her when he had passed away. And I was like, oh my gosh. And at that time I was like, oh my gosh, does a black mist mean it's evil and all these things? I didn't know anything about, the spirits. But anyway, you think that if it's a black mist it's evil, and if it's a white mist it's good? No, I don't think that's true. But anyway, I don't know why it is black or white, but I can tell you that he was not evil. He may have had some working on himself he needed to do, but he was not an evil person. Well, anyway, she left to go do that, and then that night, I guess, I was sitting at home, and I just kept feeling this presence. I started feeling this presence around me everywhere, and I knew that it must be Billy because, he's the one that just passed away. But I didn't know him well. I didn't know how to understand him if he was trying to tell me something, and I wasn't really accepting of all that at that time. I was just trying to stay away from it. Used to, I would just rebuke anything that came near me, thinking everything was bad. So I just tried to ignore it. But for like 2 weeks, it was like I couldn't go anywhere without feeling like somebody was with me or watching me or whatever. And it wasn't a bad feeling. It was just like somebody's with me. What do you want? What do you need? But it began to bother me because I couldn't get a message. And so one day I sat down in my office and I said, what do you want? And I just sat there at the desk to see if I could, get a message from him. And he's told me 10 things. I actually numbered them, 10 things that he wanted to tell his wife. It wasn't 2 weeks, y'all. I take that back. Y'all are going to see my kitties going back and forth in the background. It was only a few days, actually, that the first time that I asked him what he wanted. It was only a few days, and I said, what do you want? And I sat down, and he gave me 10 things that he wanted me to tell his wife. And I said, okay. I said, I wrote them all down, and then I said, okay, but I'm not giving this to her. Do you hear me? If you want her to have this, you're going to have to, I'm not calling her, I'm not contacting her. If you want her to have this, you're going to have to make this happen, because I'm not making it happen. I swear to you I don't swear, but I promise you the next day, who walks in my shop? Mary. And she is mad as a hornet. And if you know Mary, you don't want her mad. She's so sweet, but oh my goodness, she's a big girl like me, and you don't want her mad at you. But anyway, she was so mad, and she was just fussing, and I said, what's wrong? And it was before, we had the funeral for Billy. We were supposed to have it that end of that week. And she said, oh, I tried going to school, and she was trying to go to work, I guess. I don't know, but anyway, everybody made her feel worse. When you're mourning, people try to help you and they make it worse sometimes. And she said she just wanted to try to do what she needed to do, and everybody was giving her sympathy, which made her feel bad. So anyway, she said, girl, I need to get my hair cut. I said, okay. So I made her an appointment to get her hair cut. And as she was fixing to leave, she said, what is it, Kathy? She could see that something was going on in me, And I said, I really don't think I want to tell you right now, Mary. She goes, no, you tell me. What is it? And she said, you're getting something, aren't you? Because she knew about me. And I said, well, yes. And she said, well, tell me. I want you to tell me. And I said, okay. So we went to the back room of my shop, and I had written it on a piece of paper. So I just took it out. I said, Mary, I'm just going to read this to you like I got it, and you can tell me if it means anything to you or not. Every little thing that he had said to me she explained to me what it meant. And it was all pertinent to her life and things she had actually done in her life, like staying with his brother as he passed away. She comforted him and she stayed next to his side until he passed away. I did not know that was the sentence that I told her, that that's what it was talking about, but she knew. And then the other things, every single thing, she related to it and was able to tell me the full meaning of it. You know, I knew part of the meaning. So we did that. Well, then we had his funeral service. And when we were at his funeral service, there was probably 400 or 500 people there. He was well loved within the community, very popular, you know, part of the military. He'd been a part of the military, and just a real big part of the community. They used to, like on 4th of July, he had a big cannon and he would blow it up in his yard for 4th of July. I did hear that from my house all the time. They didn't live very far from me, but they had a big group of people that hunted together, and then they cleaned the food and prepared it together, and they all went to church together and all of the things. So he was well loved. Well, the pastor that came to do his funeral service was himself on his deathbed for the very same thing that Billy had passed away from. He didn't have much time left, but he got out of his sick bed and came to the church and did the funeral service for Billy. And then after he finished with his message, he let people come up, you know, to do a eulogy, to say a little something about Billy that they would remember, that they wanted to share. And there were several men he had been an engineer. And there were several men who were engineers who came up and said something about Billy. Everyone, I saw these big redneck men bawling their head off, you know. And as I was sitting there, of course, I was emotional because of my friend Mary and her daughters. I love them so much. And I had been doing their hair for couple of years or 3 years by that time. And I was so concerned for them, you know, I just loved them so much. And I remember the last man that spoke about Billy, he said all the good things about him. And then he said, all I know is now we have he said an angel or a guardian. We all have our own camouflage angel. And I thought to myself, one of these days, I am going to write a book called Camouflage Angel. And I didn't even put the link to that book on here today, y'all. But it's called Camouflage Angel. So that's how I met Billy and how I learned of him and what I went through in order to, I'm forgetting the best part. So a little time went on. I always forget to tell y'all the most important thing. And I was, again, bothered by someone present. And I wasn't sure, but I thought that it was Billy. And I was like, I've already told Mary the message, you know. I don't know what you want, you know. And so he kept bothering me until I sat down. And when I sat down, I just started writing this story. And I got to like page 16 of this story. And I didn't even know, you know, why I was writing this story, why this story was coming to me. But I was just getting this whole story. And when I get to like page 16 or something, I come to the place where I realize who is giving me this story. Oh no, the kid is getting the camera. And it was, hold on. And it's a boy. Sister, don't be afraid. It's a black kitty. He's so good. Actually, this is the ornery one. His name's Onyx. Anyway, I've never had black cats in my life, and now I have 3. Anyway, he was, when I came to this place in this story, I realized that it is Billy giving me the story, and so I named that character Billy Winchester because he reminded me of guns. So Billy is his name in the story, and Winchester is his last name. So that is and I called my friend Mary, and I said, Mary, I want to ask you something. She said, okay, what is it? I said, well, I explained to her what had happened and everything. And I said, I wondered if you would read this and see what you think about it, you know. And so she and the girls came in, and I handed her my papers, and she read them to the part that I was at, and she said she thought it was amazing. She said every person whose name I used in there was his best friends. And I did not even know them. I didn't know his friends' names. They aren't names. I mean, David's pretty common, but the other names that were in there, they're not names that I would have picked for a book or anything. So they were all from Billy. So Billy helped me to write Camouflage Angel. Now listen, that is not scary or bad. That's sweet. He knows I like to write, and he knew I wanted to write a book called Camouflage Angel. And I was like, what am I going to title this book? And then I went, oh yeah, I said at his funeral, someday I'm going to write a book called Camouflage Angel. So that's where the book Camouflage Angel come from. So that's my story about Billy, and I do this to honor him and his family. I love them to death, and y'all, I don't sell a lot of books or anything. It's just I like to write, and so it's mainly just sharing the stories like I'm sharing them with y'all now. And then the next story I'm going to tell y'all is also a true story. And it is, since that one didn't take me very long, and it's about, I'm going to title this The Ghost in the Bed. Oh, I forgot to tell y'all to get your lipstick on. Oh my goodness. Well, we got our glasses on, and this is the wrong color lipstick. Put your lipstick on and get a drink. Make sure you have your water. We're fixing to tell another story. Remember, the Lord told us to stay hydrated. And if you don't believe in the Lord, you're supposed to know scientifically you need water. Okay, so here we go with the next story. The next story is called The Ghost in the Bed. So what happened is, and this is a current modern day story, not one that happened to me years ago. This happened to me since I lived in the house that I live in now. Well, when I first came here, I felt several spirits within the house, and I started doing the fasting and praying thing to make them go away, because I knew one day I was walking in. My mother and I had stopped on the side of the road and picked up this little. I saw it and I was like, Mother, I'm gonna stop and get that, because we refurbish everything. My husband and I like to restore things. And she's like, well, okay, honey. So I pull over and I get this table. It's just an old little antique table, and it's just a mess. But it needs to be put back together, restained, you know, the whole deal. Well, we did that. My husband and I did that. He actually did most of it. And one day I was walking to my kitchen, and I turned around, and there was this little old lady behind me, and she was just as real as anybody. And she had on a short sleeved blue dress, and her hair was kind of curly and gray, the kitty. And she was like a little bit hunched over, and she was walking behind me like she was just following me. And when I turned around and looked at her, she realized I could see her. And then she just turned around and walked into the bedroom and disappeared. Well, she had turned to look at the table, because I had a pitcher and a water basin sitting there, and it's like she was gonna touch it or mess with it or something, but then I saw her, and so she turned around and went in the bedroom. And I knew then that she wasn't a real person, but I already knew, but somehow your mind wants to believe there's really a person there. But I thought she must be the lady that used to live in this house, or maybe she's Steve's mother, because she felt that it felt related to us. And I said, oh, you didn't scare me, because I didn't want her to think she scared me. So she had left, but I knew she could still hear me. So I said, oh, you didn't scare me. And so that was the end of that. And later on, I was telling Steve about it, and he showed me a picture of his mother. And I tell you, if she didn't even have on the same exact dress that I was describing to him, I think that's what made him believe me that she was there. But anyway, so it was his mother. So I didn't pray against her. Well, but then when I would go to bed at night, I felt something awful. And I told Steve, and he said he had literally seen a demonic face with teeth and everything on his side of the bed one night. And I said, what did you do? He said, I just turned over and ignored it, and it went away. I said, you got to rebuke that kind of thing away from you, make it leave. Because you can feel that in the house. So I had started praying and fasting against that, and I caused that thing to leave. And then I was laying in bed one night. I had just gone to bed, and I always sleep on my side, and something just grabbed my arm around the bottom right here. And I jerked away, and I said, you are not allowed to touch me. And I didn't know who it was, and I had a very uneasy feeling. I started praying against it. I said, in Jesus' name, and all the things, y'all, and I really believe. Where people just say it sometimes, no, I really believe. So I was like, I rebuke you in Jesus' name, and I was telling it to leave and everything, and you think it has to do that, right? You think if you say that, it has to do that. Well, the disciples did that, and they had some problems getting certain demons to leave, or unclean spirits. There's a difference between a demon, a fallen angel, and an unclean spirit, a lost soul that's wandering the earth. So the unclean spirits were allowed to cast them out. Well, the disciples had that problem, and they told Jesus they couldn't make it go. And he said, well, some only come out through fasting and praying. So that's why I had been fasting and praying. And here I was fasting and praying, and here this thing took a hold of me, and I told it, you leave me alone. Don't you touch me. You cannot touch me. And of course I started praying. And then I always ask for an angel and all of my cloud of witnesses to come and make them go, because I feel like we have protection from our cloud of witnesses. So that's what I was doing, and it kept bothering me. Well, I tried to figure that out. I have my own theory on that, so I'll just leave it at that. But all of a sudden, I started seeing a picture in my mind of this man, and he had kind of curly hair on the top, and then it was cut like a regular man's haircut, kind of almost even shaven around here, but then, lifted up and curly on top, like an old-fashioned kind of haircut. And I guess hair matters to me because I was a hairdresser. And he's showing me this image of himself, and he said, you ought to write a book called The Ghost in the Bed. That's why I'm telling y'all this is called The Ghost in the Bed. I need to put that on here too. And I said, and I realized that he knew that I was a writer, and I was trying to figure out who this was. And he said, I'm here because there is a lady in this town that I love. And I was like, okay. And I said, he said, I started thinking in my mind, I was like, who was a writer? This was when I first moved here, y'all. I had not been to even any of the stores or anything yet. And I remembered that when I drive into town from one of the streets, there is a little museum there, and it has an author's, it's a museum for an author that used to live here. And I thought to myself, it must be that guy that used to live here that was an author that has that museum for him. I was trying to put it all together because I always try to figure these things out. And I said, what was his name? I can't remember. And I got up and went to my computer at 1 o'clock in the morning because he touched my arm again. And I said, you are not allowed to touch me. He said, well, you know that I could have hurt you if I wanted to. And meaning that, so that means I don't want to hurt you. I got what he was saying. And I said, yes, I do know that. And so I got up, and y'all, I'm sorry, but they can. And I got up and I went to to where my computer was, and I typed in authors in Cross Plains, Texas. And of course, he was the first one that came up. The picture of him that I saw looked just like the image that he was giving me. And then I was like, I had never been to the museum or anything else. And so I started reading about him. I knew nothing about him. I've never read one of his books. Didn't think I knew him at all. But then I came to a movie that he had done, and it was called Conan. So now y'all know who I'm talking about, Robert E. Howard. And that's who I was getting. And I was trying to figure out why he was around. I read the story of how his mom had fallen ill, and then he had taken his own life because he couldn't bear to live without her. And then anyway, this all continued until I was able to tell the lady. I finally figured out who the lady was he was talking about. At first I thought he still had a relative here in town or something like that, but that's not what it turned out to be. And I finally realized who it was, and I just simply sent her a little message and said, you know, I think he really appreciates all that you do to keep his memory alive. And I later on, I kind of told her about it, but you know, I'm not sure. I know that it made her feel good, and I know that it was just a connection that he had. And again, I believe that they can come for visits and then go back into heaven, just like, you know, the angels on the ladder of Jacob and all the things. So those are just my own personal beliefs. So anyway, that's the end of my story, The Ghost in the Bed. And that's the end of my stories for this week. I'm going to be gone next Tuesday, so I won't be doing another story for a couple of weeks. But thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.